What's up guys, it's Unders, and I was live streaming the other day and the question came up of what's the best plugin to double up your vocals, and my response was quite simply the best way to get like doubled wide vocals is to record multiple layers of that vocal. However, there are three plugins that I use regularly to kind of simulate that effect. If we're working with like a sampled vocal and we want to stretch that out and make it feel nice and wide, or we're working with some backing vocals and we want to get that extra wide feel for certain parts, or there's just ad-libs that we want to like shoot into the stereo field and give that feel with them. There's three different ways I do it depending on the kind of audio I've got. So in this video, I'm going to break down the three plugins that I like to use to get wide vocals. So the first one is my true, tried and tested CLA vocals plugin. So let's jump into the DAW and break that down and how I like to use it and why. Alright guys, as you can see, we are in Logic and we're looking at the Waves CLA vocals. People seem surprised that I use this, but I actually love basically the instant results that it gets me on the sort of music I make so much that I thought we'd have a little chat about that. Here is the track I'm using it on, and I'll isolate the vocal as well.
Hold up, don't get lost in the sauce. Jedi mind tricks, don't get lost in the force. Hungry for the money, free course meal. I send my name for the bill, and I'ma pay that, always keep it drill. I'm independent, I don't need no deal. I'm jaws on the beat, I got a flow that kills. Do my ting with a few G's, Lauryn Hill. Hold up, don't get lost in the sauce.
And just on its own, it's just this section here.
Hold up, don't get lost in the sauce. Jedi mind tricks, don't get lost in the force. Hungry for the money, free course meal. I send my name for the bill, and I'ma pay that, always keep it drill. I'm independent.
Now, it's doing some really specific things for me here, but more importantly than anything, it's the profile it gives to the sound. So the way it EQs it. I think the best way I could show that is if we use something like Q-Clone. So I'll really quickly just set up a instance with Q-Clone on, just so we can see exactly what it actually does. If you have a look at Q-Clone, this should be flat. If I disable CLA vocals, so it just goes flat there, which, that's a clean signal. It's flat because nothing's actually processing. If I now engage CLA vocals, we've got all this craziness going on. What we need to do here now is just disable all of these processes. So what I want you to see is that even when all of these processes are on, there's still a bit of an EQ profile happening. It's just this little dip around the top end, and there's some very subtle bumps. Unfortunately, we can't zoom in any further. You can see just some slight adjustments there, and that little bit of profiling that happens on the vocal for me is really pleasing. As well, it seems to really roll off the high and low and just box a vocal out straight away, even with nothing there being introduced. So it is affecting the signal, and the more you push it, the more pronounced that change becomes. And for me, it just adds a really nice vocal profile. When we start adding things like this as well, look, we get roll-offs that are very pleasing and just work, and we can get nice lifts in it as well. In terms of top end, it doesn't push up where you think it would, like really high. It lifts in just the right areas, which are really great. Unfortunately, we can't see the other voodoo magic that it does do.
Hold up, don't get lost in the sauce. Jedi mind tricks, don't get lost in the force. Hungry for the money, free course meal. I send my name for the bill, and I'ma pay that, always keep it true.
So that's the first thing I find really useful. Now, I just showed you the sort of low end boosts and the high end boost that it does. I'm really making use of it here. I'm putting lots of the high end in. If we were to disable these two and just solo the vocal out.
Hold up, don't get lost in the sauce. Jedi mind tricks, don't get lost in the force. Hungry for the money, free course.
It's pretty flat. It's an okay vocal recording, but it loses that body and that fight to it. So if I stick it back on bite and lower like it was now.
Hold up, don't get lost in the sauce. Jedi mind tricks, don't get lost in the force.
Got loads more energy, and like it just feels a bit more how it should, sort of warmed up, ready to roll. And then the delay in there, which I've got really dialed back, but it's a nice slap delay. It just gives that bit of echo to it, so we can take you off as well.
Hold up, don't get lost in the sauce. Jedi mind tricks, don't get lost in the force. Hungry.
Sweet. So now it's dry and a bit bland, bit of slap delay in the background.
Hold up, don't get lost in the sauce. Jedi mind tricks, don't get lost in the force. Hungry.
but it feels pretty natural, right? It feels like almost like you listen to it in a venue, and it's just made such a difference. So if I disable that right now and then bring it back in, so I'll run these first 4 bars and then bring it back in, the difference it makes to the vocal, just those 3 little adjustments have got me much more where I'd love to have been as a starting point, which is just, it's so good for one plugin, because I would have to figure all that out with EQ, get the slap delay, send it into an aux. I can just drop that on, it's done.
Hold up, don't get lost in the sauce. Jedi mind tricks, don't get lost in the force. Hungry for the money, free course, meal. I send my name for the bill. Hold up, don't get lost in the sauce. Jedi mind tricks, don't get lost in the force. Hungry for the money, free course, meal. I send my name for the bill. Hold up, don't get lost in the sauce. Jedi mind tricks, don't get lost in the force. Hungry for the money, free course, meal. I send my name for the bill. Hold up, don't get lost in the sauce. Jedi mind tricks, don't get lost in the force. Hungry for the money, free course, meal. I send my
I don't know if it's happening automatically as well, but it definitely de-esses the vocals. Like I don't know where the settings are for it, I don't know how it works, but it always gets a little bit of control just in the right area, and you can really hear it there when you A and B it. And in terms of like context of the mix, that little plugin makes the world of difference. So I'll run the first 4 bars again and then bring it back in. Trust me, like the vocal pops out.
Hold up, don't get lost in the sauce. Jedi mind tricks, don't get lost in the force. Hungry for the money, free course, meal. I send my name for the bill. Hold up, don't get lost in the sauce. Jedi mind tricks, don't get lost in the force. Hungry for the money, free course, meal. I send my name for the bill.
It just sounds better and more with it, with that in there. And that's why I use it. Now, there are some other things with it that are super good. Now, I haven't used it in this instance, but the wide functionality just here is mint. If you ever want to really spread a vocal and get it nice and wide, literally click it onto wide, put it about halfway up like I've done, and you'll get this magic trick.
Hold up, don't get lost in the sauce. Jedi mind tricks, don't get lost in the force.
That's wicked if you ever want to like come into a chorus and you've only got the one take of a vocal, or if you're using some samples and you've only got like that mono take but you want to really widen it up, just whack this on a bus, put wide on, boost it up like that. Works superb every time.
Hold up, don't get lost in the sauce. Jedi mind tricks, don't get lost in the force. Hungry for the money, free course, meal. I send my name for the bill. Hold up, don't get lost in the sauce. Jedi mind tricks, don't get lost in the force. Hungry for the money, free course, meal. I send my name for the bill. Hold up, don't get lost in the sauce. Jedi mind tricks, don't get lost in the force. Hungry for the money, free course, meal. I send my...
I'm almost tempted to use that, but I've actually got the ad-libs in there and I could just bring the ad-libs up. But, I like that. I might use it in a little bit. Who knows? This mix isn't quite done. We're getting there. Oh, really important thing to note, the input here. So it's normally green for me. You should be aiming to get it in amber, but not red. I've got it in green here because it works and that's where I wanted it to be. It sounds right. That's how I roll. I roll for sounds right. But in terms of input, it's designed to be in that sort of amber area. I think it ticks into it a bit, but most of the time not for me.
Hold up, don't get lost in the sauce. Jedi mind tricks, don't get lost in the force. Hungry for the money, free course, meal. I send my name for the bill. Hold up, don't get lost.
Sweet, so that's CLA vocals. That's why I use it. That's why I love it. And don't tell everyone about that wide trick, because then everyone will buy it and I don't want that. So secondly, we're going to use the Waves doubler, and I use this in a slightly different way to get a different effect. So let's jump back into Logic and have a look how I would use that in a project, and a great way to get those really wide vocals and also thicken them up as well. We can combine this with what we're doing with the CLA as well. A Waves doubler, just to do a little power trick of doubling up vocals and giving it that wide stereo feel. So just a quick breakdown here. The track that I've got loaded up is both the radio mix and the full mix for the single Like a Fool. If you want to check out the full track in context to hear this trick used, I will link it in the description below for you. What we're going to focus on here is this main vocal, and this is the main lead line that runs throughout the track. Everything below it here are all sort of sub vocals. So if we were to solo this out,
I should have seen it coming. I should have read the signs. I should have started running.
that's what we've got, and this is just the lead line here that takes it through.
I should have seen it coming. I should have read the signs.
Now I've done a couple of things to double it up, including it being sent to a delay. So I'm going to mute the delay for the time being. And I also had CLA vocals on here, and I've used the wide section, pushed it just a little bit. That's generally the way that I like to do doubling. It's the same effect, just built into one slider on a plugin. So below it here, we've got doubler 2 loaded up. Now you might have both. You might have doubler 4. There might even be a doubler 8, to be honest, as well. Doubler 2 is all you need to do this kind of effect, and it's really simple to do. Let's take this down as we've got it. This should just be now a pretty mono sounding vocal.
I should have seen it coming. I should have read the signs.
I'll even take off the reverb there so it's super dry.
I should have seen it coming. I should have read the signs.
So in context of the track in this case, it's not going to give us too much. If we were to bass in there, get some of the drum breaks in.
I should have seen it coming. I should have read the signs. I should have started running.
Right, it's pretty dead center and pretty dry, right? It doesn't give much of a stereo feel. It doesn't give that feeling of like being enveloped by the vocal. That's where the doubler trick comes in. So if we load up doubler and switch it on here, instantly we got a different feel.
I should have seen it coming. I should have read the signs. I should have started running. Maybe we'll be fine. I fallen for the same trick, like a dozen.
Cool, it's no louder, it's just changed the balance, and it's effectively got copies sitting on the left and right. So the way we can do that in doubler is quite simple. If we have a look at this little interface window on the left, we've got these 2 dots, and these are our 2 other points of where copy of the audio is going to be. So if we were to put them dead center and really low down,
I should have seen it coming. I should have read.
right, we've got almost the same thing we had initially, right? If we bring them dead center and nice and high up like so,
I should have seen it coming. I should have read the sign.
cool, now we've got layered really different copies of it. We can then push those respectively to the left and right, adjusting for balance and level.
I should have seen it coming. I should have read the signs. I should have.
And that gives us that pushed out effect there. Now, the reason that works is we're making use of the stereo field to its maximum. It's like having 2 copies of it panned hard left and right. Now, these work in conjunction with effectively this little grid here. This allows us to adjust the pitch and the feel of where that vocal is going to sit. When you perform a vocal twice, you never get it exactly the same as it was previously, and that's how you get a really nice layering effect. This plays on that effect by moving it slightly in and out of pitch. So having slightly 2 out of pitched versions gives us that nice wide stereo feel. Our ears don't perceive it as all being the same version, which is why when we have it dead center, it sounds really phasey and not quite right.
I should have seen it coming. I should have read.
But if we send it only to the right ear and only to the left ear, our mind just picks it up as it being a really wide sound.
I should have seen it coming. I should have read the sign.
For a vocal, it tends to need to be really subtle. You see these are very, very close in where they're sitting. If we were to move this even slightly up here, it's not going to sound right.
I should have seen it coming. I should have read the sign.
Yeah, it's starting to feel more like an echo, right? If we were to push it exaggerated out here,
I should have seen it coming. I should have read.
it starts to warble. Equally, if we've got them too close together like this, we'll still hear that phasing effect even though they've been panned.
I should have seen it coming. I should have read the sign.
So it depends on the vocal, but you need to do it by ear. So it's relatively close together, and generally one just a touch above or below the other.
I should have seen it coming. I should have read.
That's going to work the best for us. Now, generally on the EQ section, I will take out any low end below about 200. Depends on the music you're doing, depends on the vocal as well. If it was a male vocal, there might be a lot more low mids and even some low end that we want to keep in there. In this instance, my kick drum and snare are right around the 100, 200 marker. Don't really want the vocal interfering with it too much. It sits nicely like that. So if we just throw bits of the break in.
I should have seen it coming. I should have read the sign.
Right, we're not losing anything from the vocal and they're just sitting nicely, not fighting anywhere. You can just flatten this out quite simply. I just tend to put that roll off in there. It can be quite nice to roll off a little bit of the highs on the sides as well.
I should have seen it coming. I should have read the signs. I should have started.
Again, depends what you're after. A nice trick can be to automate this as well. It gives the feeling of it opening up on, say, chorus sections. So you can have it just like this here, and then automate this just to open up, and you get something like this.
I should have seen it coming. I should have read the signs. I should have.
Right, so it opens up to the big wide vocal. There's a couple of other things that we can do, but generally this will let us pull off that trick. Like I say, I will generally use CLA vocals. Switch it to wide here and just push it up a couple of dB, 4.5 in this instance. That gives us almost the same effect, and it's just quicker to set in. So if I was to switch the CLA back on now, we'll have a pretty similar feel.
I should have seen it coming. I should have read the signs. I should have started running. Maybe it would be fine.
And that, guys, is how you can use a doubler to create stereo vocals. I hope that was helpful for you. If it was, throw a like on the video, and any questions, throw it in the comments down below. And my third option is the ADT plugin from Waves, the artificial double tracker, the one that kind of was pioneered with the Abbey Road's plugins, and it was the way the Beatles were doing their artificial double tracking. It gives a really specific effect, but something that can work really nicely in your tracks if you use it in the way that it's intended to be used. But you can also play around with it and get some pretty interesting effects going. So let's jump back into Logic one more time and check out how we use that. Alrighty, so here we are in Logic, and this is my mix project for this track. Pretty busy track, lots of plugins going on, lots of processing, and we're going to add some more to that. So if you haven't heard this track before, I'm just going to play the first 4 bars here, just so you can get an idea of what's going on before we start looking at some of the things. Alright, so we're just plodding along there, lots of instrumentation, some nice vocals going on. I've chosen this particular bit because it's, believe it or not, kind of stripped down for the rest of it, and we can hear the effects and things that are going on really well. So loaded up here on the right hand side, I've got the Real ADT plugin. And what is it? So essentially what it's doing is it's taking your audio in, like a mono track or a stereo track, and it's gonna slightly alter the speed, alter the panning, alter the drive, potentially alter the phase of the left and right channels. And it's gonna do that to create the perception of width and difference between the two. So double tracking gives quite a strange thickening effect. It's almost impossible for us to recreate exactly the same tonality and note twice, vocal wise. And so when we re-record a session or re-record a vocal and layer it, it sort of thickens and addends to it instead of it phase cancelling and causing all sorts of problems. That just happens naturally with our voice. The tiniest little nuances affect so much because it's such a complex instrument when you speak and sing. The aim of this was to artificially recreate that. Save time, so record a single track and use your ADT to do that. However, it didn't really work that well. It gave a really sort of artificial sound because it just is unable to create so many subtle nuances. What happened instead though is it created a fantastic stereo widening effect. So having it left and right, similar to how you would create something like a Hass delay, your ears perceive this to be a much wider sound coming from a much wider source because there's these slight variances in time and speed changes, and it can create a great effect when listening to something in stereo. So just for an example here, we've got it on the main vocal. If we enable it, that's the one that I've got loaded up just here. And you'll see now that this vary speed here starts moving, and that's going to alter continuously throughout the track, and it's varying the speed of audio passing through it. So what we could do is solo the vocal here, and we're going to hear that it's really quite wide and loud. This isn't necessarily how I use it, but it's a good example for you to get an idea and concept of what's going on. Now if I disable it and we listen to that first passage again, yeah, it's a lot more central. What I'll do now is I'll play it and I'll enable the ADT and you'll hear the jump.
I just wanna be where you are.
Yeah, so it really sort of spreads the sound away. It's more of like a change of feeling than a change of sound. And it can just be a useful mix tool. So if, for example, we had some backing vocals here and we wanted to have those spread away and out of the center, we can take the center mono mix down and use this to spread it out like that. So what I've done as an example is created a bus, and that audio track that we just listened to feeds into that bus. We can see it's just here. Go into bus 14, and then I've created the channel here called ADT, and we're going to enable that one, and we'll bring it up and just cover up our other one here. Get rid of you. Lovely, don't we look beautiful? Right, so I've got the bus disabled. I'll then enable the bus. Now this is going to be a much subtler effect, but then I'm going to bring the whole mix in. I want you to hear the difference it has when introducing it just on the bus and having some more control over it.
I just wanna
So without, with,
I just wanna be where you.
and that can really help us create that thickening up of the vocals. I'm going to introduce all the instruments now, play it, and then I'm going to bring that bus in. And what we'll do is we'll just loop the first couple of bars here so we can just go over it nicely without wasting a whole world of time, because your time is precious. So let's do that just there. So we will have the bus off and then we'll introduce it, and hopefully you'll hear that change occur. So you hear that like thickening that's occurred, it just beefs that vocal up a little bit. Let's go to a part where it's a bit more vocal, and let's use the word wordy. Now without. Now back in. Cool to the beans, right? So it's just thickening it up, and I'm not having to get double takes made or do anything else. And if you want to hear just what the bus is doing, it's going to be effectively the same as what we heard before, but a few decibels quieter. Now we can make this a bit more extreme, take it one step further. If we bump you just up there, let's go into my classics here. If we grab, HEQ is going to do the job for us. And we'll just grab you here, pop you next to that. We are going to change it from stereo to mid-side. Make sure we got this mid-channel selected. And the two sliders here on the left go to M and S. We're going to take the mids out. So now we've only got the left and right, the differences occurring. Now that sounds really freaky, right? However, if we now bring the actual vocal in, we can probably bump this up quite a bit more doing this. 'Cause I never meant for it to end this way. Yeah, that gives us a really cool effect. We've just got the stereo effect happening on the ADT channel because we've pulled out everything that's mono. We're just getting the difference created by the left and right. And that's just a nice little trick for you guys to do. I apply that a lot to bass lines, believe it or not. So I'll have a copy of my bass, I'll take out all the mids and then get a load of sides going. So it's always got some mono compatibility, but we've got loads of crazy stereo stuff going on, so it feels huge. So the other thing that I will quite often do is take it onto a reverb as well. So we've got some really nice cello recordings in here. It's going to be this bit here. No, it's going to be this bit here. Now this is better to hear within the mix. So we'll get rid of you guys again. And we've got string hall here. I've got a Space Designer with a obviously nice reverb on it. There's an EQ doing just a big chunk of low end cutoff because it's a cello and it was adding loads of extra weighty wobbliness that I did not want. So we sound like this. This is going to be the cello section. We'll mute the vocal because they sit in sort of a similar space. Now we're going to do that with the real ADT on it as well. Now it's just on the reverb, remember, so it's just on this sound. But like, listen to the difference it makes when I bring it in and out. So I'll start with it in and I'll take it away. Yeah, so it's just adding like that little bit of width and detail going on. It brings a reverb, which is already stereo, giving us some room and movement, just brings it out a little bit more, pushes it a little bit more to the side and gives us that detail in there. Just a subtle little trick that you can try out. Now, I suppose we should probably go over what this thing does and how it works. So, beautiful source. So, what's effectively happening is it's coming in and it's being panned hard left and right. You've got two channels, your left channel and your right channel. Obviously it's going to be a stereo plugin for what it's popping out to us. You can choose where those sit. So for example, I could go hard right on both. That's not what we want. We can have them center, which is okay. And that gives us our like artificial doubling effect. Right, but where the magic happens on this sort of thing is by doing the hard left and hard right. Now it's an analog emulation and driving it gives quite a distinct change, but what you can also make use of is driving these ever so slightly differently. So if we drive the right a little bit harder than the left, we might have to gain stage it down a little bit. To end this way, 'cause I never meant. It was a bit much there, but it gives just another little difference. It widens it up a bit. It is quite useful as well if you're going to have them both in the center to have them driven slightly differently. 'Cause I never meant for it to end this way. Anyway, that is for you to have a play around with. Now, what's going on here with the vary speed, you can adjust the movement time and how far it's going to move each side at what sort of speeds. I tend to go quite subtle, like really, really small amounts either side, and sometimes drop the range down to really tiny amounts as well. It completely depends on like your piece of audio and what's working with it. But you can do the range change so it moves much more drastic amounts here. Notice it doesn't move much when you've got it around here, but it takes the overall values to like minus and plus 20 milliseconds, which you'll see flies out a lot more. Whereas if we bring it right down, which I'll normally have it like around 2 or 3 to be honest, it's going to be moving a lot less, and then the maximum is actually only at 3. So it's a lot subtler to do it that way. If you want to go for extreme effects, go for extreme effects, just how I work with it. Cool, so that's pretty much it. There's lots more info on the Waves website. I will throw a link down below. Just give it a try. I don't know another plugin that does this job as well as this does, but if you do, please let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to check that out. There are lots of stereo plugins out there. I just don't know anything that takes it to this level and lets you do this with it. If you like the little trick with using the HEQ and taking the mono out, throw me a like on the video for that. I really appreciate it. So guys, that was my 3 plugins. I appreciate that was a marathon of a video, so thank you very much for sticking through, and I hope the information was helpful to you. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. Thank you for liking the video, or if for some reason you watched for 30+ minutes and you didn't like the video, then thumbs down, I guess. Why are you still here? Don't worry about it. And guys, I will see you on the next one.